How y'all doing? Cool. I'm going to present something to you about the United States Pharmacopoeia, and many of you have probably heard of USP, but many of you don't realize what USP is and what it does. Most of you think it's a bureaucratic organization over here in Bethesda that sets up standards. It is, and it's very bureaucratic, and it does set up standards for all pharmaceuticals. But I'm going to talk to you about a new venture that they're going after and how they're going to combine some chapters, work through some issues through their expert committee on drug storage, distribution, and packaging committee. And it's going to impact all of us. It will, especially the pharmacy group in the room. So we'll get going here. The USP mission is quite simple. It's to improve the health of people around the world through public standards and related programs to help ensure the quality and safety and benefits of medicines and foods. The USP is not a small group. They employ over 600 people all over the world. And they got offices in India and China, and they got everywhere. And they have a huge complex of offices in Bethesda, right near FDA, not too far away. The standards that formed by the USP are used by 130 different countries and on their drug standards of law. And the United States uses the USP-NF, which stands for National Formulary, and that national formulary is the official compendium of pharmaceuticals used in the United States. It's also the official compendium used in many, many other countries. Now, some people accept it, and some countries accept parts of it, and some countries accept it all, depending on what country you're in and how they run the standards for want to do it. But I want to give you, as I said, an overview of the Package Storage and Distribution Committee, what we're going to try to do, the goals of the committee, the processes that are used by the committee. I won't spend much time on that, and the reorganization of the committee, this new chapter that we're trying to write called 1083. The Packaging and Distribution Committee is a part of the standard committees of USP. It's a huge committee. When you look at it, this is the liaison of the committee, the Package Storage and Distribution Committee, expert committee. They represent industry, manufacturing, government agencies, USP. There's 2 or 3 people from FDA on it as liaisons, not official members, but as liaisons. We have a lot of industry consultants from all over the world. People, when we meet a couple, 3 times a year, and we have a conference call at least once a month to go through the problems and all kinds of, especially right now with the rewriting of these chapters. They asked me to be on it because I don't fit in any of these categories, and they added up a new category, academia, but I got asked to be on it about 4 years ago because of my knowledge of the counterfeit and drug diversion trade, and they needed somebody that could help them with that whole trade. So, Mary Foster is the chairman of the committee, and Mike Aikens has also worked pretty hard on it. So we're updating the USP standards of our packaging systems and materials construction of the packaging. It's really a challenge, the materials itself. We have a special expert committee that just looks at the glassware used to store drugs. We look for the extraction of pieces from the molecules out of the glass. We look for leaching. It's called leaching, where the content in the glass leaches through the glass. You've all been to your old garage and pulled out an old can. It's been in your basement or someplace, and you pulled it out and you go, why is all this content on the outside? Well, it leached through the container. And that's what we've been doing testing on, looking at plastics and glassware. Plastics present some real problems with pharmaceuticals, especially liquid pharmaceuticals. So the subcommittee process, we do workshops. We have bring in the experts from all over the world to work with us. We do bi-monthly telecoms and annual meetings, and we got one coming up in October, a 3-day meeting. USP, this committee will work on it. Coupled with that, and Mary Foster told me to bring this in when we were talking about this presentation. She said, you need to bring in some pieces of this United Postal Service, UPS survey they did, global survey on distributors of healthcare products and pharmaceuticals to see what their perceptions are on the global market. Well, what we found when we looked at it and we worked with UPS on this survey is that it paralleled and shadowed what USP was doing. And I'm going to show you maybe three slides of the results of the survey. If you haven't seen it, pull it up on the web. It's fascinating to look at it. And there's a YouTube version of the results of it too. They looked at 440 distributors of healthcare products. Most of them were pharmaceutical products. There were some device manufacturers in there, but most of them were pharmaceuticals. When you look at the results of it, the top issues for these distributors were regulatory compliance, product security, and managing supply cost. However, when you start analyzing it, you will see that product security between 2012 and 2013 switched positions. Product security is the number 2 ranked problem that they're facing and have to identify in the distribution of products worldwide. Cost comes in 3rd now, with product security being number 2nd. And regulatory compliance, trying to comply with all the different rules and regulations of all the countries, is number 1. When you look at it by region, Asian Pacific, Western European, and US and Canada, the thing is, look at the orange bar on Asian Pacific. The distributors in the Asian Pacific area saw product security as their number 1 problem. Getting the product secured and shipped out, and it beat compliance monitoring or trying to stay with compliance with it, but the security is their number 1 there. It comes in number 3 in US and number 2 in Western Europe, product security. So this chapter is every 3 years we review all the chapters in USP, every 3 years. And this chapter came up for review, and we decided that we were going to combine some pieces of other chapters into this chapter. The 2 general chapters we're trying to work on is good distribution practices. That was one. And then the other one, that was the Package Storage and Distribution Expert Committee Review of 1079, the good distribution practices of drugs. And then we're going to take a look at excipients expert committee and try to put those all in the same. What we're trying to say is, shouldn't good distribution practices apply to excipients, APIs, and finished product? Why have 3 separate chapters for good distribution practices, storage, and packaging? So we're combining all those and putting them into 1 chapter, which is a lot of redundancy, and we got to pull things out and make it clear. So that's exactly what we're trying to do and trying to look at it. So we got the distribution, storage, and distribution committee, got the excipients, where you included dietary supplements in this, and now we're starting to include compounding products. People making compounded products distribute those drugs and package those drugs, and we want to make sure that they're distributed and packaged correctly. They follow the same procedures. The proposed chapter will be a 1083 chapter, is the chapter name, and it's good distribution chapter, and it will have subchapters underneath it with different components. The components are quality system management, then you got the environmental control, the temperatures, the cold chain managers in the room, that pertains to you, the 1083.2. The exportation and importation management, there's going to be a new section on importation and exportation of pharmaceuticals in this USP standard, 1083.3. And then there's going to be a new supply chain integrity, what kind of supply chain and integrity of that supply chain in 1083.4. And I'm not going to go through this, it's 2, but I want to point out a couple things. The significant changes was the new 1083 is intended to cover counterfeiting, falsified pharmaceuticals, traceability, how do you trace it? That would be the serialization type numbers that are being used, cargo thefts and diversion. So we've really expanded it out for cargo thefts and diversion and counterfeiting in the USP. It's gone much wider. In the new 1083, it's going to be written. And note, this is a key factor. It just doesn't pertain to manufacturers. Note, this new standard is going to pertain to hospitals delivering drugs, pharmacists delivering drugs to long-term care facility, wherever they got to go to, pharmacists delivering drugs to patient homes. And the key one on this one It's going to cover mail service pharmacy and how they deliver the drugs, especially cold chain type drugs. They got to be sent by Federal Express or UPS or US Postal Service to the homes. And those standards will be adopted for them to follow, because we've always been wondering about mail order and the cold chain aspect of sending insulin and a few other things sent in mailboxes for a day or 2 days, hot mail. It will cover those. So it's a huge change. So that was the quality management. I'm going to skip that to get through here real quick. Like, you probably wonder, why don't we just use GMPs and GDPs? The reason is we don't do that because they're different. They're all different from different companies, different countries. They're all different. We're trying to come up with one uniform standard that everybody could use for the USP. That's the major thing. That's why we don't do it. Environmental condition, the cold chain. We're going to cover short-term excursions. Short-term excursions versus the long-term excursion. We cover long-term excursions, not shipping drugs, state to state. But short-term excursions, that's where it gets in those hospitals, moving drugs to another hospital. Or we got a pharmacist in Austin that moves drugs all the way almost 300 miles to a long-term care facility. Some of them are 400 or 500 miles, and he does it every night. Transfers them back and forth, throws them in the back of a van, off he goes. It's unbelievable. Cold chain is violated, just throws them all in bags and off they go. So that's what we're trying to get at completely. Importation and exportation. It's not intended to cover the importation and exportation laws, but it is acknowledging the chain and how good the chain is, and looking for vulnerabilities in the chain, and the contractual agreements between different distributors. I want to skip this one. You got it in front of you. And supply chain integrity and security. Supply chain integrity is going to economically motivated alterations, counterfeit, falsified, diversion, supply chain security, theft, loss prevention, layered defenses, understanding vulnerabilities, geographic distribution of the pharmaceutical. So it's going to be a very encompassing, it's going to be a very long chapter, no doubt about it, with sub-chapters in it. Then we're going to add finished products, excipients, as I said, active APIs, packaging components and materials, and clinical trial materials. Clinical trial materials are going to be included in this. How do you distribute clinical trial materials, and the labeling on clinical trial materials involved with it? So it's difficult to regulate this industry. It is very difficult. And I don't think any one organization, USP can't do it. It takes cooperation of a lot of different organizations, private and government and public. It takes everything. We just need to work together and get it going and to secure it as the best we can. But it is very, very difficult for USP to even think about doing it. But they're going to try. They're going to give it a good try. Now, I'm going to plead with you. We need experts on this committee. The expert committee's got about 15, 18 people, 18 I think now. Then we're going to come up with subcommittees and how we do it. And right now, we were on the phone last week. Repackagers are a problem for us. Big problem. And now we're trying to figure out, we need some repackagers, good quality repackaging pharmaceutical experts to be on the committee, a subcommittee within this group to look at the repackaging standards and how we're going to repackage the components. So I want to thank Mary Foster for all of her help and went through this with us. And many of you know Mary. She's a great lady and really understands pharmaceutical industry and the packaging and distribution. And I'll take any questions you have, or do you want to wait to the end for the questions? I don't care. Any volunteers? Yes, sir.
What's your timing on the 1083 new chapter?
We're looking at the next year. Yeah, next year. The excipient chapter has been written. That's been done. Leachables and extractables for plastics and glass has been done. We've got about 5 chapters, sub-chapters finished. Now we're just working on this. Repackaging is the biggest issue right now we're working on. We would think that perhaps 2 years before it's official voted on, but we'll have a draft within the next year, we're hoping. You guys been too kind. Thank you. All yours, Tim.